Well, good morning, and it is Talk It Out Tuesday on this Thanksgiving week. Many things going on uh, as we all prepare for Thanksgiving. All my family's at the house and our immediate family. We're not having any extended family this year uh, just because it's very difficult. But getting ready for that, decorating the house, all these other things going on. I'm sure you are busy as well. Now there won't be any dailies Thursday or Friday. I might have something for you tomorrow. It's not guaranteed, so we'll just wait and see what happens, right? So you'll just have to wait and see what happens with tomorrow. But today is Talk It Out Tuesday, and had a late entry question come in yesterday, and I'm going to address that here this morning. Last week's reading included Daniel and portions of Daniel, and one of the portions was in the end of Daniel. And it's here that we have the great vision, dream, if you will, of Daniel. And here's where it gets complicated, right? Because he's going to use days, years, times. What does it all mean anyway? Does Daniel and Revelation, that because they both use times and a half a time, they both use the 1200 number. What do we do with this? What does it mean? Is there a timeline? Well, I did talk about I think last Sunday or the Sunday before, that we don't have a clue. We don't have a real idea of what's going to happen. We don't have a real timeline of what's going to happen. And I shy away usually from trying to pin down God. I just don't think we can pin him down. He hasn't said on this date in history, this is going to happen. He tends to reveal to us that we are to be prepared. We are to be ready. And I'll give you some conclusionary statements at the end of our time this morning. But without any further ado, we're going to dive into Daniel chapter 12. If you want to get your Bible out, if you see me looking up, I'm looking at the scriptures that I have open on my screen. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes that I made in preparation for today. This isn't like some of the other questions. This one takes a little more research because I want to be accurate as I can be. And yet there is going to be a shade of opinion simply because God has not been super clear. I mean, Jesus said, hey, it's going to be like a thief in the night. We put security systems in place because of what might happen, not because we received a letter from the thief saying, hey, on this day, I'm going to come by your house. In the same way, there are clues, there are hints, there are revelations that are made, but nothing concrete enough for us to say, hey, it's going to happen on this date. I believe that God did that on purpose simply because he knows us as humanity. He knows he knows the predictive nature of humanity and the procrastinative nature of humanity. If I know that something's not due until an X date, I don't mess with it until I have to. Yes, I know there are some of you out there that got your syllabus on day one of your college career, and you had the paper that wasn't due until December, written by the end of September. That's not me. So, and I don't think that's most of us. And I think that's our nature. But so we start in Daniel 12, and really this starts in Daniel 10 through 12 as it talks about a variety of things. But we get into 12, and it says, at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands watch over your people, will rise up. There will be a time of distress such as never has occurred since nations came into being until that time. Now, if you have done your homework, you know that Matthew 24 states something of this nature. Jesus is quoted here in Matthew 24 as having said, look, there's coming a time that earthquakes and famines and all, and brother against brother and sister against sister and father against son. And there's going to be all kinds of complications, and the earth is going to give up the dead and all these things. He said a time is coming. So Daniel has a vision that says, well, there's a time coming. Jesus says, hey, there's a time coming. So is Daniel referring to something that happened in AD 70 when the temple was destroyed? Is Daniel even looking, or is he being given a vision even further ahead? Or is Daniel a portion of the process of this historic, progressive situation that is going on? That's right. Your answer is as good as mine sometimes on those things. I do think that he's a portion of what's going on, and we'll get to that when we get down to verse 9 as to how that relates over to Revelation. Because when you read Revelation and you got the bowls and the trumpets and the scrolls, these things are opening up and everything is being unleashed. You've got so much of the world in destruction, so much of the world in disarray and dismay, and all these things that are going on. Jesus said, a time is coming. Daniel saw a vision, a time is coming. And I would suggest to you, a time is coming. Verse 2, many who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to eternal life, some to disgrace and eternal contempt. I believe this is referring to the judgment that is going to happen. We know that at the return of Jesus, the dead will rise. 1 Thessalonians 4 says the dead will rise first and meet him in the air. Then the great white throne judgment happens in Revelation. And so I think this verse 2 is referring to some of these things. Now, Daniel doesn't have a clue because the New Testament hasn't been written. He doesn't understand any of this. Those who have insight will shine like the bright expanse of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. That kind of reminded me of the 7 letters of Revelation. Those who have ears to hear, let them hear. Those that endure to the end will receive the crown of life. These are things that have stated. So you see, there are some correlations in Daniel 12 and Revelation. I still don't think there's a timeline that you can put out there saying on this date and this time. I think we need to be aware of the signs and aware of some things, as every generation should be. Every generation should be aware because it raises our urgency level. I talked about that on Sunday. You can go back and listen to the message as we finished up our Frenemies series in this last Sunday. All right. But you, Daniel. Okay, here. So Michael has come and he's had this vision. These things are happening. Okay, but you, Daniel, verse 4, keep these words secret and seal the book until the time of the end. Many will roam about and knowledge will increase. Okay, Daniel is told to seal the book. You remember what John was told? John was told to unseal the book. And we see in Revelation 4 and 5, we see how we have who is worthy. Who's worthy to untie the scroll? Who's worthy to open the scroll? And it is found that the Lamb is worthy to unroll the scroll. I love the Chris Tomlin song, Who is Worthy? I suggest go listen to it today. It'll bless your life. Go listen to that. Chris Tomlin, Who is Worthy? I'll put it in the show notes later on. And I'll give you a link there if you need that. Otherwise, just Google Who is Worthy, Chris Tomlin. But then he says, so keep the word secret and seal the book. And then he says, many are going to roam about, knowledge will increase. That suggests that there's time that's going to pass. Daniel seals the book. We read in Revelation, that is hundreds of years later, John has a vision of something going on in heaven that is yet to come. Okay, so verses 5 and following. Then I, Daniel, looked, and the question today was, what does 12:7b stand for? What does 12:7b mean? Well, to get to 12:7b, we have to look at all these other verses too and realize what's going on. So then I, Daniel, looked, and 2 others were standing there, one on this bank of the river and one on the other. And one of them said to the man dressed in linen, who was above the water of the river. So you got two angels, and they're about to speak to what is seen as a representative Jesus, or a type of Jesus, type of Christ, the man dressed in linen, who was above the water of the river. And they ask the question, the angels ask the question, how long until the end of these wondrous things? When's it all going to be over? So we've seen this great vision. These things are going to happen. You've got all this stuff going on. You've got the horn, the little horn. You've got all these things going on. When's all that going to happen? And then I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the water of the river. He raised both his hands toward heaven and swore by him who lives eternally. So Jesus raising his hands to God, that it will be for a time, times, and half a time. Many will use this phrase to mean 3.5 years, which is half of the 7 years that is well documented to represent the tribulation. Is it exactly 7 years? If you understand numerology in Scripture, 7 is a perfect number. 7 is the number of divinity. 7 is the number of perfection. So when you see that there's going to be 7 years of tribulation, do you pull a calendar out and start clocking the days? Or do you look at it and say, there is a perfect amount of tribulation that is divinely provided, and we must have a sense of faith and trust? That's a personal decision. I tend to move more toward the idea of the symbolism and the numerology of it. I don't get into trying to get in the weeds of okay, what's this date and this date? Okay, let's start clocking our days. But he gives us these things. And Daniel, look, I heard it, but I didn't understand it. Welcome to the club, Daniel. None of us understand this. So you heard it and you didn't understand it. So what's he do? He asked, my Lord, what is the outcome of these things? And look what he tells Daniel. Go your way, Daniel. Go on your way. What's he mean by that? Well, I think initially what he means by go on your way, Daniel, is you don't have to understand everything. We're just telling you this. You're going to write some things down. You're going to seal the rest of it up. And you don't have to understand these. The words are secret and sealed until the time of the end. We're not going to tell you all of the nitty gritty. And we want that. Why? Because we're in this information age and we want to know. I want to know. But we're not told, are we? We're not told. He says, many will be purified, cleansed, and refined. The wicked will act wickedly. None of the wicked will understand, but those who have insight will understand. Okay, so there's going to be this time of what's going on. Let's go back to verse 7 for a second. So you got time, times, and half a time. And he says, when the power of the holy people is shattered, all these things will be completed. What does that mean? I mean, if we're going to talk about a time, times, and half a time, if we're going to talk about that in terms of 3.5 years, which, really in our, and then which calendar do you use? Do you use our calendar, which comes out to 1,277 days? Do you use a calendar based on lunar calendar, which comes out to be less than 1260? And then he talks about 1260. He talks about 1290. He talks about 1335. What does all this mean? When the power of the holy people is shattered, all these things will be completed. When the holy people are shattered. That's happened in several different places, by the way. You had Antiochus Epiphanes would slaughter a pig on the altar and completely desecrate the altar and the temple. You had the Romans come in and desecrate everything that's going on. You had the Mohammedans come in and desecrate everything you got the Temple on the Mount that is a Muslim temple that's actually on the temple grounds of Jerusalem today. You have what is considered what we call the Antichrist that is yet to come, that is supposedly to make a treaty. He's going to make this treaty, and then he's going to break the treaty, and then the tribulation happens. When does that happen? We don't know. We don't know. Who is the Antichrist? We don't know. God doesn't name him. Now, there's been a lot of conjectures over the years of who it is. And here's the problem. They've named it Antichrist. Okay, tribulation has started. Well, is it 7 years? Is it 3.5 years? Is it an actual number? Is it just a generic amount of time? When did all of this start? When was all of this enacted? How did all? And we don't know, because we keep living, don't we? We keep moving on, don't we? Well, so Daniel asks, what's going on? Daniel wants to know what's going on. And he's told to go on his way. You've got people that'll live right. You've got people that will live wrong in verse 10. So he says, okay, verse 11, from the time the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Okay, that's a little over 3.5 years. If it's actually 1,290 physical days. Now, see, we have trouble with this. And I was talking, somebody else had asked, put in a question about, we talked a little bit about days and time and how God views time, because God views time radically different than we view time. I mean, the Bible says in 2 different places that a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day. So don't be impatient. God's not forgetting us. He just operates in a different sense of time. So is it 1,290 days? Is it 1,290 years? What is it? I mean, you have the 6 days of creation, and the 7th day God rested. Well, if you look at that, the first 3 days that we talk about days, there was no sun, no moon, no seasons, no stars. How do we define a day? We define the day based upon 24 hours that it takes to revolve around the sun. We mark our days by the sunrise and the sunset. We mark our days from one sunrise to the next sunrise. And even today, now that we have hours, minutes, and seconds, we run our day from midnight to midnight is considered a day. But did you remember that in day 1, day 2, and day 3, it says morning and evening? There was no sun. How long was the morning? How long was the evening? Was it 3 24-hour days? Was it 3 periods of time? My goodness, a day could be 1,000 years. It could be 1,000,000 years. Which is it? Now, I don't deny the power of God can do whatever he wants to. He is sovereign. He has blown breath into dirt and made it live and animate itself. My goodness, he could do whatever he wants to do. He could have done all of this in a matter of moments had he wanted to. The Bible records 6 days. What do we do with that? Is it 24-hour days? It could be, absolutely. Is it eons of time? Sure, it could be. Is it a little bit of both? Could it be an eon of time and then the sun was created on day 4, and then you mark time and seasons at that point? And so day 4, 5, and 6 are actually 24-hour days, which is magnificent enough in its own right, isn't it? So what does a day mean? What does a time mean? How do we define that? And do we shackle God to our time frame? So we have to be careful here. This is why I don't preach and teach this a lot, because people get all up in arms over this stuff. Oh, so if you believe do you believe in a young earth or an old earth? Do you believe that the Antichrist is this person or that person? Is it this entity, that entity? And when do we start marking our days? How long do I have before I have to choose Christ? We don't know. Jesus said, I don't even know. What? Yes, he said that. He said, I don't know. The Father alone knows these dates and these times, because the disciples asked the same thing Daniel did. When's this going to happen? And they had Jesus. He said, yeah, I don't know. You just follow me. You follow me. And when I give you the Spirit, follow the Spirit. Do what the Spirit tells you to do until such a time as you see the eastern sky break and you welcome me in the air, or you breathe your last breath and you get to rise again in a bodily resurrection at the time that I come back. Either way, just live for me. I don't know. But some big event's going to happen. When the holy people are shattered, when the power is shattered of the holy people, grammatically correct. When the power is shattered. When does that happen? Was it during the Maccabean revolt? Was it the Romans? Was it the Greeks? Was it the Muslim? Is it going to be the Antichrist? Yes. No. It's a mystery. And I think we're just going to have to sit with the mystery. And as much as we want to solve that mystery, because we want to know the end, we want to know what happens, we have to know. And my question is, what if you don't know? Is it okay with you? Can you survive it and not know? I know it's hard. I know it's hard. But apparently some big event or some organized effort is going to happen. Okay, here it is. So the power is shattered. Do you start marking the time then? And 3.5 years, Jesus comes back. If you want to be literal about it, do you walk 3.5 years after some big event, which is in the future, and we don't know what that event is? People have been trying to claim this and that event for centuries. Oh, this is the event. Well, 3.5 years passed. Oh, this is the event. World War I, this is the event. World War II, this is the event. The zombie apocalypse, this is the event. Some big event's going to happen. And I'm not being disrespectful. Some big event's going to happen, and we don't know what it is. We don't know when it is. But some big event's going to happen. Is it an organized effort when we finally tell the whole world and the gospel is presented to the whole world? Jesus would say in Matthew 24 that until the whole world hears, this stuff doesn't happen. The end doesn't come until the whole world hears. Has the whole world heard? Or does it mean when the whole world has an opportunity to hear? Do you see all the shades of interpretation? All of the possibilities of this mystery that Jesus dropped in our lap, that Michael dropped in the lap of Daniel, that Jesus dropped in the lap of the apostles, that John, 100 years after that, would drop in the lap of the churches that we now have and claim as inspired scripture. We've dropped this in our lap. Meanwhile, we're supposed to stay the course. Happy is the one, verse 12, happy is the one who waits for and reaches 1,335 days. Really? What does that mean? Does it mean it's 75 days after the 3.5 years? I mean, okay, so it's 75 days after? Is it that the Jerusalem is surrounded by the armies and the church has 45 days in which to find a way out and 30 days to do this, and then the 3.5 years starts after the breaking of the treaty that the Antichrist had made with Israel, and so you got 3.5 years to finish up the tribulation. Jesus comes back. What happens? Here's the thing. You can start clocking days, but here's the thing. Clock the days. From what event? Daniel's not told what that event is. He's shrouded in mystery when the power of the holy people is shattered. What does that mean? Well, I mean, we tend to understand that the Antichrist is going to come and outlaw Christianity. Welcome to the new world, right? I mean, that's how far away are we from that? I don't think far. But guess what? They were telling us that 100 years ago. We're not far. Man, we're not far. Wall Street crashed. Oh, we're not far. This must be the end. World War II came. This is the end. Abortion was allowed. Oh, this is the end. Who is it? Was it Mussolini? Was it Hitler? Was it some politician you don't like that you want to throw in as the Antichrist? Maybe it's the European Union. Well, that's the gathering of the nations. Is that what it is? Well, now the European Union's breaking up. So now what? What do we do with this? So Daniel's told, but as for you, go on your way to the end. You will rest, and then you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance at the end of the days. So Daniel basically is told, not going to tell you. Maybe you can't handle it. Maybe you're not prepared for it. Maybe God just doesn't want us to know, but wants us to live in continued expectation. So what do we gain from this? What do we learn from this? 4 things I want you to know. Number 1, God has a plan and you don't know it, and neither do I. God has a plan. Can I be satisfied to know God has a plan, even if I don't know the details of said plan? Now, the control freak in me and the control freaks in many of us that might be listening have difficulty with this because we want to know what the plan is. We want to know what's coming. We want to know what's happening. What next? What next? What next? What next? To the end. And God's like, trust me. Do I trust God has a plan? Do I trust that? Second thing, we are to stay faithful. We see this throughout. We see this in verse 10. We see it in verse 13. We see it in verse 12, implicit. Be faithful. You stay faithful to the end. Are we in the tribulation now? Or is the tribulation yet to come? Is the tribulation been this whole church age since the Spirit dropped? Or is it still yet to come? And how long is it going to be? And do the Christians escape before it? Do they escape in the middle of it? Do they have to suffer all the way through it? And they're just protected in an eternal sense? What happens? When do all these things take place? And what about that 1,000 years in Revelation 24, 20 and verse 4? What about that? When does that start? And does Jesus set up his reign on earth? Does he abolish this one and have a new one? God has a plan. Our responsibility is not to understand the plan. Our responsibility is to stay faithful through the process and trust in the leadership. God has a plan. I don't have to know what that plan is. I have to do what I'm told when I'm told to do it with a sense of obedience and faithfulness. Number 3, endure to the end. Don't give up. Don't give up. Our life is hard sometimes. Circumstances stink sometimes. But those who endure to the end, happy is the one who waits for and reaches 1335. Is that supposed to express to me that it's somehow after the 1290, that 45 days later, if I endure 45 days more, does it mean that the 1335 started before that time frame? And so 1290 and the 1335, they both end at the same time, and I just endured to the end, or I endured past? Just endure. Happy is the one who endures. Stay faithful. I can sum up the whole book of Revelation. Jesus wins. Will you be faithful till then? That's the whole point. Daniel's trying to encourage people. Look, things are going to happen. It's going to get bad. God has a plan. Let's stay faithful, endure to the end, and basically bring as many people with you as possible. Many will be purified in verse 10. Many will be cleansed. Many will be refined. So bring as many with you as possible. What does time, times, and a half a time mean? It can mean a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, in context to the whole vision and the whole process, it is to remind us God has a plan. He has it in detail. He knows days. He knows times. He knows events. He knows things we don't know. The real question is, will I trust? Will I be faithful? Will I endure? And will I bring others with me? That's the real issue. So when something like COVID came along, will I trust? Will I be faithful? Will I be obedient? Will I endure? And how many people will I bring to Christ even in the middle of a pandemic? That's the call. That's the path. I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving. I saw the question, what does it really mean to have patience? I'm going to talk about that next Tuesday. So I'm going to let you practice that a little bit before we talk about it. Hey, have a great Thanksgiving. Love you guys. Enjoy your time as I will with family. And we will see you again next time.